Good. Can we start? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this next session of the Vienna Migration Conference 2021. This session will be dedicated to the Mediterranean in focus, joint leadership and shared responsibility for a revitalized approach to partnership. My name is Julien Simon. I am the head of Mediterranean region and the regional office for the Mediterranean based in Valletta, Malta. I am delighted to be here present today with a very distinguished panel composed and representing the diversity and the variety of institutional actors involved in the field of migration. We have in English alphabetical order of countries representing France, Ambassador Christophe Leonzi, Ambassadeur chargé des migrations. Representing Germany, Mr. Ulrich Weinbrenner, who is Director General for Migration, Refugees, Return Policy from the Federal Ministry of Interior, Building and Community. Representing Malta, we have Mr. Neville Aquilina, Director General for Global Issues, International Development and Economic Affairs from the Ministry for Foreign and European Affairs. Et représentant la Tunisie, nous avons Madame Hamida Rais, Directrice Générale de la Coopération Internationale en matière de migration du ministère des Affaires sociales. Cette session se déroulera en...
This meeting will be conducted in English and French. We have provided interpretation equipment. You find it on the headsets on your seat.
Joining me here today, so I will be switching between English and French for the purpose of the dialogue today. What we are going to focus on is to reflect upon the fact that the Mediterranean has been at the heart of the migration agenda and migration cooperation for the last 2 decades. That quite recently, in early 2021, the European Union took the initiative to present a new agenda for the Mediterranean. Is this new agenda for the Mediterranean the right setting, the right move, the right dynamic that we need to usher a new era in terms of cooperation? It's sine qua non. Acting together as partners being key. What does it truly mean? What is this partnership going to translate into in real terms, concretely in practice? I think it's very, very important because over the last day and also this morning, we have heard a lot of views with regard to what partnership means, how to translate this partnership, how to approach these partnerships, and what to make of it. I think that in the Mediterranean region, we can truly capitalize on decades of engagement, trust-based relationship, open dialogue, and to promote an approach which, for ICMPD Mediterranean, we believe will revolve around the idea of joint leadership and shared responsibility. This conceptual approach, we believe, is going to help define the common ground that we need to bridge often diverging political agendas by focusing on particularly important element, even if not the only one, which is related to the capacities of migration stakeholders in general and institutions in particular. We will articulate this discussion around several issues, but I really invite all our panelists to react to any intervention made at any given time during the discussion. I would like it to be as fluid as possible, evidently. In the first round of discussion, I would like to focus on redefining these migration partnerships and what are the priorities. Madame Rais, je me tourne vers vous et...
I turn to you, Madame Rais. How would you define the partnership in migration for the Mediterranean region? What are the priorities which you think have to be taken into account in this new approach? Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the International Center for Migration Policy Development for its initiative. I am greatly honored to be able to be part of this panel in order to share with you my vision on the renewal of partnership in the Mediterranean, particularly with a view to migration. Under the particular circumstances caused by COVID, which has complicated a situation which was already complex and complicated. And I should also like to refer to the interdependence of challenges and opportunities and of the interests of the countries on either side of the Mediterranean. As you said, I'm Director General of International Cooperation on Migration. I have worked within the framework of various partnerships, be it with the European Union or within the framework of other projects supporting this partnership, as well as at bilateral level in the negotiation of bilateral agreements on matters of migration. There's been an agreement with France, Switzerland, and Belgium, and we intend to conclude an agreement also with Italy. So, on the basis of my experience, I would like to attempt a kind of evaluation and to invite you not to reimagine a new situation. I prefer to be realistic and base myself on what there is. In order to have an innovative form of cooperation and to transform challenges into opportunities, we have to promote a kind of cooperation that highlights the positive aspects of migration and that promotes the values of tolerance and mutual respect. A migration should be, this is a realistic view of migration and a constructive one that is capable of providing concrete solutions under these exceptional circumstances. It's important to take an inclusive and global approach which considers all aspects of migration and that pays greater attention to development and integration, protection of the rights of migrants, facilitation of mobility. As regards irregular migration, we have to regard it as a global phenomenon that needs to be dealt with on the basis of solidarity. We have to work on employability of migrants in order to be able to come up with a response to a very exceptional and fragile situation in the face of the multitude of migrants at the borders of Europe and also the challenges of irregular migration. We have to think of supporting measures for people who voluntarily return to their countries of origin. We have to provide economic support for them, and we have to fight against human trafficking, and these are cross-border crimes, and therefore we have to focus on tripartite cooperation, both within the framework of the existing provisions and also new ones. As regards legal mobility, we have to support states in developing an offer that needs the needs of the European markets. I think more work will have to go into the exchange of information and the formation of networks, also with regard to employment of migrants. A plan has to be, a concrete plan has to be drawn up for young people, and initiatives of circular migration have to be promoted that facilitate economic integration after an experience in the European countries, and that would strengthen the capacity of people. Of course, visa facilitation is also an important issue when it comes to readmission. We have to focus more on questions of development. We have to try and mobilize the diaspora to involve them in developments in their countries of origin, in promoting investments there, developing local strategies. So this is a question of awareness building among local actors, and creating closer ties between the diaspora and the local actors. We also have to focus on the humanitarian dimension. Attention has to be paid to the vulnerable migrants that have been affected most strongly by the health crisis. And the social system is confronted with a major challenge in this respect. They have already provided enormous assistance throughout the COVID crisis. I think more equitable and fairer treatment of migrants in the framework of the crisis is essential. So we have to try and harmonize what exists already in the field of migration and development. We have a new agenda for the Mediterranean, a new migration pact, and there are so many initiatives, and there is a risk of getting lost in these numerous initiatives. I would also say that we have to involve other actors, civil society, the social partners, non-governmental organizations, which also can come up with innovative ideas and solutions. Finally, I would like to draw attention to the need to institutionalize an open and continuous dialogue between experts, which can lead to the establishment of a migration policy, a common migration policy that considers the interests of the countries, both on the northern and the southern shore of the Mediterranean. Thank you very much for this very profound contribution. You highlighted a number of priorities on which we will have to focus in the future. In order to build a bridge to other questions that will be discussed, I would like to come back to what you said about being realistic on account of your mandate. Of course, you focused on social aspects of migration. It's very important to have a complete overview of the actors involved. But as regards the need to be realistic, and now I change over to English.
Aquilina and Mr. Weinbrenner, to ask you the following question. What approaches do you think would help bridge any differences between the EU and the southern neighborhood to deliver, and I think it's very important, to deliver mutually beneficial migration partnerships. So again, looking into this ambition and pragmatism or realism. Basically, perhaps, may I start with you, Neville?
Thank you very much for having us here. It's a very interesting discussion over these 2 days. Let me first start by underlining what is a fact. I mean, that there is an important political gap between Europe and the southern partners on migration. Migration is top on the European agenda, whereas realistically and understandably its importance is not equally matched in the south. So in my view, ignoring this reality does not make for solid foundations for mutually beneficial partnerships. Partners on both sides, we need to accept that migration is a shared concern and a shared responsibility, of course in line with the global pact on migration. So I think it is crucial, and some colleagues already mentioned this, and you said it also, Julian, to reflect on what common ground could pave the way to mutual benefits. We have to demonstrate that we are true and equal partners. And yesterday I was really pleased to hear the Commissioner of the African Union mention the Valletta framework. It's all there, the 5 pillars, and mutually agreed. And then, of course, we do not know perhaps that if a capacity-centered approach to migration partnerships is the holy grail, but it's a good plan. I mean, I remember when we were faced with migration inflows in Malta back in 1999-2020, we didn't have a clue. Today we are 20 years ahead, we have a lot of experience, and if you look at the new agenda on the Mediterranean of the EU, decided in the European Council April 2021, I mean, it's great comparing it to where we were years ago. I mean, and yesterday was a very good discussion regarding the EU. I mean, it's not perfect, but thank God there's the EU, because it's like, I compare it to the Il Faro di Alexandria, the lighthouse in Alexandria. But, of course, we see it as imperfect, but whatever. So, but going back to the subject, and this is the reason behind the migration capacity partnerships. This institute we are going to, which Malta will very gladly host, which will help assist in building capacities for migration experts, for people working in migration in the southern and also in the European field. So, 3 important points, very short points, I will not take long. One, migration is here to stay. I mean, whether we like it or not, it's here. I was impressed by the numbers produced by the UNHCR, 82.4 million people on the move. This is science, it's not opinion. Then something which really amazed me is that 1% of the world's population, 1 in 95, is now forcibly displaced, compared to 1 in 159 in 2010. So instead of going to the better, so this is the first point. The second point, the slow administrative processes which keep frontline states at risk of reaching crisis situations. On that we need to deliver. And thirdly, problems and instability is still there. I mean, we see the situation in Libya, Syria, Yemen. And of course we do not manage to resolve these, I mean, as fast as we want them to. And perhaps we need to really engage even more deeply. Let's hope that for example, looking in the Central Med, that our friends in Libya, they will manage to take the country forward and hold the elections. It's so crucial, and we of course support them. So to summarize, we need, I mean, the principle of joint leadership and shared responsibility, this is crucial. It encourages us to acknowledge each other's competencies, know-how and capacities, and together define what this common ground is and how we can emerge and deliver mutually beneficial partnerships. I think unless we do this, we need to work together. And this idea of partnership, that's why I really like the intervention of yesterday. That Valletta has it all. I mean, the five pillars, they're there. Thank you. Over to you, Julian.
Thank you very much, Neville. Actually, very good point that you mentioned Valletta. I had noted that in my note of your intervention, Madame Rais, when you said il y a un véritable risque de se perdre dans ces trop nombreux cadres. Et peut-être peut-être revenir.
Well, you said that there is a risk of getting lost in these numerous initiatives. Perhaps the Valletta framework can be a kind of umbrella.
The figures provided by UNHCR, 82 point something million. Well, that's my perfect bridge. That's the population of Germany, more or less. And I would like now to give you the floor, Mr. Weinbrenner, perhaps to give us your reflection on this idea of redefining migration partnerships.
So, many thanks for the invitation to ICMPD. It's a very good opportunity, and I'm thankful to have this discussion with you here on the forum today, on the podium today. Very briefly, I just want to, from the German point of view, to give you a short overview of the situation in which we are actually in Germany. We had the elections, and we are now in the phase of forging a new government, which most likely will be finalized by the end of this year. There is, I think, a certain likeliness that it will be headed by the Social Democrats, together with the Greens and the Liberals, and what that exactly means for migration policy is not yet clear. At least we had received a 12-page first paper, which they all agreed upon in order to start the coalition negotiations, but that is very much based on what is already carried out when it comes to migration, when it comes to international responsibility, and even to migration. The term is used in this very short 12-page paper of migration arrangements and migration treaties with third countries. Today, the minister will present, just actually at the press in these minutes, something dealing the actual crisis we are facing with irregular migration from Belarus mainly. Together with our Polish friends and our Lithuanian friends, there is a certain pressure from that side, and he will as well mention the aspect of secondary movements from people mainly from Greece who have been already granted protection status in Greece and which moved on to Germany, and we have a figure of about 35,000 of these who have already been accepted as refugees or given protection in Greece and then moved on to Germany, and for legal reasons we cannot move them back. Why I am hinting at these points, which do not necessarily have something to do with the Mediterranean and what we are actually discussing. I think it is most important that from the German perspective, but as well I think from the broader EU perspective, that we do not jump from one crisis to the other, not only jump from one crisis to the other, and I left out the West Balkan route and the situation we are facing there, the deteriorating situation, but that we very much have a long strategy, along lines over years, and follow our strategy, because migration and dealing with migration, improving the situation, is something that really takes a long effort and that cannot be carried out just in a few years' time. What I can only say to what has been said by you and by others, I can only agree. I think we all have the necessary papers. We have the strategies. We have the action plan, the EU agenda, the Valletta agenda, the 5 pillars. Everything was mentioned, and when you go through it, you can only agree. Yes, that's what has to be done. But I think what we are now should more invest on is how exactly to get things done and to implement the different measures. And I think that the European Union now, with the action plans which are discussed and which are still in an ongoing process, which are about to be finalized, is something that is really a good effort. For example, when it comes to Tunisia, there is the action plan where, based on the different activities already carried out by member states in relation to Tunisia, then identification of an extra value that the EU can provide is the aim of it. And what we have to keep in mind is as well the fact that we don't start from scratch. We don't talk about only about migration when it comes to the southern Mediterranean countries. We already are based on a long bilateral by member states and EU cooperation with these countries, and now we have to keep in mind that migration is one of the aspects which necessarily have to play an important role. What we are talking about, but that's very much part of a broader partnership, of a broader cooperation with aiming at development, and where migration perfectly fits in and should fit in. One last remark from my side: we talked about the EU-Turkey statement 2016. I think, although there is lot to discuss about it, and there is a very intense ongoing discussion how to prolong it, how to improve it, and how to modify it in a way, I think that at least this model is something that could really serve as a model for other countries as well. We should not focus on the problems it has. We had to solve in its implementation, and it was not really implemented properly, at least not as it was thought in 16 when it was drafted. It is in the interest of the European Union and of Turkey as well. We had first of all some problems on the Greek side. Now after Corona we had the problems on the Turkish side, and now let's hope to get that started. I do not underestimate these problems, but I think the idea of doing a partnership on migration on an equal footing between southern Mediterranean countries and the EU, following this example, is really worth the effort. I do not speak about disembarkation platforms, the term which was used in June 2018. That is not something which is, in my ideas, part of it, but rather the partnership approach, but more or less following the EU-Turkey statement. I know there are visa questions, trade questions, and broader migration question, all involved, but I think that might very much serve as a good example.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weinbrenner. You talked about the need to have a long-term strategy, avoiding jumping from one crisis to another. I think it's indeed essential, and to also get things done. The fact is that we need to deliver on this partnership. We need to go beyond words, and the various kind of models, mentioning the specific model of the cooperation with Turkey, to be revisited and perhaps adapted and explored, capitalized on potentially cooperating with southern partners. Je me tourne vers vous.
I turn to you, Ambassador Leonsi, to ask you, as regards cooperation between partners along migration routes, and when it comes to defining a global approach, what can be done there? First of all, I'd like to thank the ICMPD for having organized this annual conference as a place of encounter for fruitful exchanges, also in preparation of the French presidency of the European Union. Migration issues play an important role, and this is certainly a place where ideas can be developed. So thank you very much for having accepted to moderate this panel in 2 languages. I think multilingualism is something we have to work on to a growing extent. As regards the topic of migration and the Euro-Mediterranean partnership, this is a topic which is at the very heart of our concerns in France. France has been strongly invested in the development of the Mediterranean partnership, the dialogue 5+5. France has been very active in this respect. This is an absolute priority for us because we are convinced that migration needs cooperation, and it depends on cooperation with the countries of the South. So what we need is a strategy that enables us to arrive at solutions in cooperation on migration. This is absolutely essential. So it's a topic that comes up at all European Council. It was an important topic in June. This year's European Council will also be dedicated to this subject. So it's a great concern for all of us. So speaking from the French perspective, and also with a more European angle in mind, we are working in close cooperation with our Slovenian friends in preparing the French presidency. It has been said already that the health crisis and the economic and social consequences of the COVID crisis have had an impact on cooperation on migration. The legal migration flows, as well as the development of irregular migration flows, cooperation in the field of readmission, all segments of cooperation on migration have been strongly affected by the COVID crisis and its economic and social consequences. This is something we always have to be aware of. We have to relaunch a positive trajectory in a context that was upset by the COVID crisis. From this point of view, you spoke of a new approach, a global approach. I would underline that the European Union has been working a great deal on the external aspects of migration, and I think Europe has a large number of new instruments, new capacities, which we now have to make full use of in order to relaunch the partnership with our friends from the South, in order to re-establish a good and sound basis. In particular, we have been speaking of the European teams, so to speak, or in the field of migration. This is something that was launched by Spain with countries of like Morocco, and other countries of the South, and our Italian friends are particularly interested in the route that goes to Italy. Countries like Tunisia are particularly interested in that. So these European teams push the member states of the European Union to cooperate. There are French, Italian, German efforts, all aimed at improving cooperation, fostering the exchange of best practices in order to be more efficient and to bring about a convergence of efforts. Given the enormity of the issue at stake, we all have to cooperate. And there is a second thing that is positive. Of course, there are many initiatives, but the idea of bringing about convergence and complementarity is important. You also underlined the logic of the migratory routes, which is a dynamic logic. It's evolving, and therefore I think it's most appropriate to encourage cooperation with our third country partners in border protection, but also in returning migrants to their countries of origin. Tunisia has a problem there, a program there, which is still limited, but it's aimed at returning people to the sub-Saharan countries under acceptable conditions. And registration at the borders also serves a better cooperation between the countries concerned. There is another point on which the European Union has developed a good idea, the Neighborhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, and part of that is to be dedicated to migration. And I think this is an instrument that will help us overcome the polarization between the countries on the one hand and other actors that are working in this field. This NDICI instrument can help us overcome the polarization and to work together, all of us, in the management of migration. It's also about the fight against criminal networks that are undermining the state under the rule of law. I think we have to arrive at a situation in which the resources of this new instruments are put to good use, with a special focus on our partners in the Mediterranean. And finally, we also have new leverages, one in particular within the framework of the visa issue. Article 25 speaks of visa facilitation if cooperation works well. I think we have to renew and deepen our positive instruments, particularly the offer in the field of regular migration, the so-called blue card. There are many ideas being discussed, particularly on the positive instruments available. And I think if we put together all these instruments, we ought to be able to steer and renew the Mediterranean partnership, because in the Mediterranean, there is the key to the success or failure of the migration policy. Thank you very much. You spoke of the Team Europe, which enables coordination of various approaches. I'd like to add that what we need is greater coherence in our offer vis-à-vis our partners in the South. You referred to the new instrument. We expect a lot from this instrument, both in Europe and in the southern countries. This idea of governance in migration demands substantial resources. This is an area in which we need not only strengthen the capacities through professionalization and qualification of the actors in the field of migration. There are many actors there. It's also an area in which we have to modernize the instruments, we have to think about the question of modernization of infrastructures, of equipment, of services in general that are linked to governance of migration within the framework of the new agenda for the Mediterranean and the Global Compact on Migration. Is an approach which is particularly important. So may I ask you, what role does the professionalization and modernization of actors in migration play? What do the capacity partnerships play in migration? Perhaps I turn to you, Mr. Weinbrenner. What's the position taken by Germany as regards elements of modernization? And you have come up with the idea of modernizing the capacities.
I think that very much is in relation to what I said in my first intervention. Everything is already more or less on the papers. We have plans. We have nothing really to invent. Basically, when it comes to strategies and procedures, what we really have to improve is that things are get done, so that in practice, when it comes to implementing these papers, not only on the diplomatic field between the different partners in migration, but as well on the spot, on the ground, that these the different challenges which the different countries have to meet are identified, and that we share knowledge and so on. That is the basic idea which is behind our plans for the next for our ICMPD's presidency next year, that we will put it under the headline of improving operational capabilities. That is a very broad box, if you like, which could be composed of numerous activities which we would like to focus on in the year we are having the presidency, which is on a long and short period à la fois, like the French say, I think. So what we were aiming at is to have to start activities which have a certain impact, and which are not ended after the 1 year, but which really improve the situation. So you mentioned it already. When it comes to capabilities, that's infrastructure, that is as well the knowledge of the people involved in all aspects of migration. That is migration management, that is asylum treatment, that is housing, you name it, everything which belongs to this field of policy. And what we especially want to focus on is the aspect of information. We are, on the national level, are developing a tool which would help predict migration flows and better manage migration flows. We already started this activity at the EU presidency. We did a workshop under the headline Migration 4.0, and there are activities in other member states as well, but we are quite confident that that might help in improving the operational capabilities to better know whether migration flows are about to come, what the composure of the people is, and to better be prepared, and as well to transform and transport information which is already done on a technical level, in order to avoid misunderstandings and false information, which absolutely play an important role in this field. So that is something we are very closely together with ICMPD, our friends from ICMPD, developing the idea and naming the different aspects, and that will be the headline under which the presidency next year of ICMPD will stand, and that applies for all kinds of regions, all kinds of migratory routes to which ICMPD is a partner, and that naturally as well to the Mediterranean and the countries involved. And there is something going on, if I'm well informed, in Malta. And we are very carefully looking into that activity. We are not yet part of it, but that is not excluded. But we are still in the phase of, as I mentioned, when it comes to building the new government, in the phase of looking at the developments, and that might well fit into our ideas, building operational capabilities. But it's not yet decided.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weinbrenner. You actually made the transition for me, so I turn towards Malta. And Neville, I would like to ask you about Malta's perception and priorities with regard to these aspects related to professionalization, modernization. Actually, Mr. Weinbrenner mentioned the training institute that your minister and your ministry and authorities are spearheading. What could you tell us, and how do you perceive, or how do you see this as being something which is going to help translate this idea of renewing migration partnership into concrete results, getting things done, basically, as Mr. Weinbrenner was saying, having the ambitions but pragmatism that Madame Rais was pointing out?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, and I appreciate the German input on getting things done, and of course the experience by our Tunisian counterpart, and of course the vision of the French. I mean, we're in good company, so that's really great. And of course the Team Europe approach, as mentioned by my colleague, and the whole of the route approach. I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, we really have. The sky is the limit, the way I see it. I mean, there is a push from every side to engage in these partnerships. And so we're very pleased to accompany our chair of ICMPD 2021. We have championed the flagship initiative to create a training institute where European and other partner countries would together shape and deliver these qualifications in a spirit of joint leadership and shared responsibility. I am referring to the Training Institute for Migration Capacity Partnerships, for the MED, which will be formally opened in Valletta in December this year, with the participation of a number of European and Southern European partners, as well as EU and EU agencies. Of course, migration has always been and will always be part of our societies. So that is why we need to really invest in the long term. And I think this is is one of the fruit outcomes that could prove useful, beneficial, to really speak the same language and to engage proactively together.
Thank you very much, Neville. Before we go into, I see that some questions are already popping up.
I'd like to come back once again to Ambassador Leonci to hear his point of view on the issues which we have been discussing, the question of modernization, the whole range of it, the question of professionalization in migration. What's the position of France? Thank you. Continuity is an important aspect in this respect, and we should not forget that we need a framework for a dialogue that works well, be it bilateral or other. Sometimes the framework is a bit rigid, and we need a more flexible form for bilateral dialogue, but also for dialogue at a European or regional level. Of course, we already have the readmission code. That's an important topic at European and bilateral level. There are instruments that ensure continuity and professionalization. and we need better cooperation between the actors of the member states, but also the institutions of the European Union, be it on asylum issues or be it Frontex, that has its own statutes, and better cooperation with the partner countries would be essential. That would make a very important contribution. As regards modernization, it has been said already that we need to work on partnership capacities in the field of training. Training is a priority. But there are also technological issues at stake. It was mentioned that we are making great advances in the field of digitalization, the possibility of managing asylum requests remotely. All the technological aspects are part of the capacity issue and can indeed be a game changer in cooperation. I'd like to mention one point we are focusing on in France. We have a large diaspora in France, which has its traditional links with the countries of origin. There are financial transfers, and we are trying to engage in a dialogue with its representatives in order to encourage investments in the productive economy, in SMEs, in the regions concerned. There are many entrepreneurs that have a migration background, so one could over time bring about a development in the way people in the diaspora see their contribution to the countries of origin. There are also programs of repatriation, people going back to their countries of origin, perhaps with the intention to set up a business there. And this needs organizational support. So we would hope that a more positive dialogue can be developed there so that our work can be more fruitful. What we need is a triangular approach which facilitates the regional logic, and that also supports our southern partners in facilitating the issue of repatriation or return to the countries of origin. So we could work along lines which so far have not yet been sufficiently used. Yes, you mentioned modernization of capacities also in terms of technology, which is going to be essential. You spoke of the engagement of the diaspora and their potential investments in the productive economy. That is a modernization approach. You also mentioned the triangular relationship, a partnership with the South that goes beyond and involves other partners as well. I turn to you. You spoke of social issues. I think for you, a strengthening of capacities is an essential question. Mr. Weinbrenner spoke of the strengthening and improvement of information. Tunisia, I think, has been strongly involved in this issue. As you said, in order to manage migration better, we need innovative partnerships. We need to have an administration that is modern and capable of reacting in times of crisis, but also capable of developing migration strategy and implementing and evaluating these strategies. The strengthening of the capacity of institutions and of the public administration is crucial. There are several projects and initiatives aimed at strengthening the capacities of the public administration. There is the so-called Migration Progress Project, which is being financed or co-financed by the European Union, and it's aimed at management of migration and strengthening of capacities. And it's being implemented by the ICMPD office in Tunis. We have developed a plan of action, and we've decided on activities to be undertaken in Tunisia. We are going to evaluate projects and work on knowledge building. The work is still going on. So I think capacity strengthening and capacity building is extremely important, as well as knowledge building on the various frameworks of cooperation. It's a very good thing to organize training sessions. It's good for the Europeans and for the other countries that can be informed on the new pact, the new compact, new assistance processes. Twinning between institutions is a very useful thing. The scope of interventions has to be broadened. They should not be focused at the central level, but also at local actors and the social partners, as well as representatives of civil society and non-governmental organizations. This is what's happening in Tunisia. We also have to work on strengthening the capacities of the media in order to ensure proper positive media coverage, not stigmatization of migration. So this is a very important part of the whole system. And of course, technical support is essential. A support aimed at improving the public services in terms of digitalization, certain services for migrants, for example, within the framework of a European project. We had the occasion to cooperate on the digitalization of authorizations issued to migrants coming back to Tunisia and obtaining a work permit in Tunisia. Through activities aimed at providing better information for people wanting to migrate, and the competencies and skills of migrants also have to be upgraded. Thank you very much. Well, we have already received a number of questions which we have to answer, and then we'll come back to the question of media coverage, which is extremely important when it comes to building an efficient partnership and working in the spirit of Valletta. I think we've had several questions. I will select one or two.
Something that I would like to ask all of you perhaps to rapidly reflect upon. Every country faces specific situation and its own opportunities. There is no one-size-fits-all. Tailor-made solutions are needed, but are there areas where we should rather take a regional approach to? And if yes, which ones? Who would like to answer this one?
So maybe I can try to say a few words on that. I think that's right. There is no one-size-fits-all tailor-made approach is needed. And if a regional approach maybe along migration lines adds to that, I cannot see that it could replace the tailor-made ones, but I think that might be a parallel development which have to be strongly interlinked. I think that is a very, very broad answer, but that leads me to the idea that when it comes to relation with one of the non-EU countries in migration based on the action plans, a kind of a desk system might be useful. That's what we developed through in our presidency, saying that the European Commission, the EAD, and should be present, but as well the member states involved, interested in having close relationships in migration with this country. That does not necessarily mean that all the 27 have to be together in one country, but that might be a dozen or whatever. It depends very much on the economic, historical, and whatever migration route interests. So that is something, a forum under which as well the question could be discussed. Focusing on one country, on a partner, in a partnership, whether a regional approach should be as well useful in order to supplement and to add to this bilateral thing between the EU and its partners, whole of Europe approach, and the third country. That might be looking different when it comes to the West Balkans compared to North Africa, for example. I can hardly imagine Morocco and Algeria being partners together with the EU, for example. That might not be a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you very much. Is there any other reaction to that?
Well, I could add a few words. Fully share the view my German colleague expressed. I think there are some topics on which for sure the regional approach is meaningful and brings added value. Fight against criminality and criminal networks, clearly. I mean, they are transnational, so I mean, there are some partnerships which have a really very important regional approach, and it must be so. On the management of borders, on management of migration, I mean, we need regional approach. That's for sure. We also can have some exchange of good experience, of good practices in regional dimension. So I think if we talk about triangular cooperation with South-South movement, is something which has, clearly a regional dimension. So I think it cannot be the only way we approach, as was said. I mean, we need a tailor-made approach also, because each country has its own specificities and history, etc. But on very many very important topics, we need this. We really would need and encourage a regional approach. That's for sure.
Neville, please.
No, I fully agree with the feedback and the views. And of course, I would just like to add that this is very important, no one size fits all, and the different regional approaches. For example, in the Mediterranean, we don't have a choice not to save people. I mean, it's a sea border, people are on the boats, they're sinking, whereas when you have a land border, you can just say stop, you cannot proceed here. So it's very different. But here I want to re-emphasize, to underline, the capacity-centered approach. That's a very good plan, and for every region to invest in. Now we're talking about the Mediterranean and engaging with our southern partners, and I think this is crucial. To talk the same language, we really need to invest in professionalization and to build a network.
When you reflect upon the idea of joint leadership and shared responsibilities, a few months ago I had the privilege to be asked to support a session of an event held by the Portuguese presidency, and we talked about it was within the framework of the talent partnership discussions, and we talked about the idea of Team Europe, and I just threw out there the idea of Team Europe meets Team Africa, for instance, would be an interesting idea, because in my view, at the end of the day, when we talk about Europe and regional approaches, Europe itself is a regional approach to a certain extent. We are working together as a group of countries in order to make things better. There are difficulties along the ways, we cannot deny that. We don't always agree, but there is a genuine effort to work together. So perhaps in this approach of Team Europe, the way we engage along the migratory routes in a spirit of joint leadership and shared responsibility, engaging with a Team Africa approach as well, could be interesting under the umbrella of the Valletta framework, for instance. Qu'en pensez-vous, Madame Rais?
What do you think, Mrs. Rais? It's very important to strengthen cooperation at bilateral and regional level. Because this enables us to harmonize the positions of countries regarding migration. Thank you very much. I turn towards the audience. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes, we have a question there.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je m'appelle
Good morning.
Alexis Chimimana Neuberg.
I'm Alexei Shima Neuberg. I'm chairman of an organization of the diaspora in Vienna.
Et je suis en même temps ici à Vienne le chef de la radio-télévision africaine.
And I'm head of African radio and television in Vienna. Well, you mentioned the involvement of the diaspora in the search for solutions. You also mentioned media coverage. The diaspora is always mentioned when it is to be involved as a partner. But what does partnership with the diaspora really mean? Partnership with the organizations of the diaspora can be an instrument that leads to new initiatives, as exemplified by France and also Tunisia. Now the question arises, how can one integrate the policy of the diaspora in the partnership? How can one involve policymakers in the partnership with the diaspora as a partner? We often offer our assistance, but it's not accepted. Thank you for this contribution. You have given me the chance to prepare the last round of questions, which focuses on communication and media, but perhaps Ambassador Leonzi would like to react to the contribution. Thank you very much for your contribution. This is a topic which we certainly have in mind, developing dialogue with the communities, with the diaspora, listening to them, to the solutions they are proposing. This is absolutely fundamental. I recall the idea of supporting investment projects by the diaspora in countries of origin in the productive industry. And the communities have the diaspora has a great deal of experience in this respect. We have to listen to them, to the proposals that come from them, and dialogue fora can be organized on this topic so that we can hear their suggestions and support them with instruments that enable them to strengthen and promote investments. This can lead to economic dynamism and an improvement of the situation. I think Mr. Weinbrenner also wants to say something, but
information on the German approach when it comes to integrating the diaspora. That's not necessarily already based at the subject we're talking here, migration agreement with the country of origin, but there is in Germany, for example, one of the numerous diaspora organizations which is called the African Nation in Germany, and we from the Ministry of the Interior are supporting them structurally, financially every year in order to help them build up an organization calling themselves together that are 800,000 partly very small initiatives all over Germany by all African peoples of African origins in Germany. That's just one example, and they even are now embarking on the return business, on doing counseling in return and doing return activities and so on. That is something which is quite delicate, as you might imagine. But I think that it's absolutely a good idea to further develop this approach when it comes to the bilateral migration agreements. But you have to keep in mind that at least that's our experience, the diaspora is quite diverse situation. You have people from countries of origin which are well organized. There you have sometimes a very strong influence of the country of origin where you are not really sure with whom you are talking. So that has to be kept in mind. But in principle, I think that is extremely helpful. And when it comes really to build on a partnership with the country of origin and with the people of this origin in your country living, it's absolutely necessary. And we already had the idea 20 years ago when the high-level working group was founded. I was dealing with that business. Diaspora involvement was already on the table. So it's not that a new idea, but we have very much to further develop it.
I cannot agree more. I am absolutely fascinated by the potential of the diaspora, being myself a member of the French diaspora, having left France about more than 25 years ago. Madame Rais.
We have a question here that in particular concerns Tunisia. We've already spoken about the issue of diaspora, but how does Tunisia manage the migration compact? Well, there is a link between this question and the question of the diaspora. This is one of the objectives of the migration compact. One of the priorities of Tunisia is mobilizing the Tunisian diaspora, encouraging them to invest more, participating in a development in their country of origin. So we're working a lot with organizations in the diaspora, Tunisian organizations abroad. And most recently, we organized a forum in which elected Tunisian representatives in other countries were participating, and the municipalities in Tunisia are being encouraged to develop networks and cooperation with elected office holders abroad. Tunisia is very active in the preparation of the compact and its implementation. In preparing the compact, we were very active in participating in the drafting of the position of the Arab countries, but also with African countries. We developed our contribution to the action plan and the implementation of the compact in the period from 20 to 22. We also supported We also participated in the regional forum in the Arab region as a follow-up to the compact last February. And at the end of August, we participated in an African follow-up forum. And we've become aware of one of the difficulties in following the compact at national level, because there is such a problem of coordination. There is a great deal of fragmentation among different structures and ministries, and therefore the idea came up of a working group which is to follow the implementation of the compact at national level. And we have focal points at all ministries and departments concerned with the migration compact. Last April, this was launched last April, and we recently organized the first meeting of this working group. An action plan was developed. Work will be done on strengthening of capacities, knowledge building about the content of the compact, and we also worked on the organization of workshops and reflection groups, particularly on the question of protection of minors among migrants. So this is more or less what we are doing or about to do. Thank you very much. Coordination among institutions is certainly a particularly important point. Unfortunately, we only have 5 minutes for the last topic. I had prepared questions, but I will skip them because the question of communication on migration is a particularly important topic. If we don't treat these questions objectively, we will, in terms of communication, have an unfavorable context for any partnership. So the migration narrative and the way it's dealt with in the media is important. I think France has signed a cooperation agreement which focuses on communication as one of the priority issues. Well, it's not an easy topic, a very delicate topic, and I thank ICMPD for raising the topic, because ICMPD has a great deal of expertise in this field. IOM as well has done work in this area. It's a key topic, and it's a question of balance in our discourse, all the more important when it comes to migration. It has to be a performative discourse that has a direct effect. When we think of the social networks, but also the networks of the alien smugglers, of the people smugglers, they are very aware of what is happening in the field of communication. We have the project of a forum on to debate the question of the narratives in the field of migration. We have to leave behind the irrational arguments, although it's not always easy, and try as much as possible to base ourselves on reasonable arguments, on facts. That's the first thing. And this concerns also our internal debates within the European Union. There is also a question of balance between solidarity and responsibility. After all, we all hold a public responsibility. We also share responsibility for the discourse that is going on in the media. Migration is an extremely complex issue, a global issue, and we have to avoid as much as possible a partial approach. What we want is a discourse on the benefits of migration, on the importance of legal migration. Students, scientists, we also have to have a discourse on that and a clear debate on the risks of migration, of irregular migration, the impact of movements that destabilize countries, that lead to phenomena of corruption of considerable scope. So it's this balancing that doesn't make things easy. And there is no linear development or no linear function between development and migration. And this is why we have this responsibility of balancing the discourse. Well, we can continue the discussion in 2 weeks. I would like to thank all my panelists for their contributions. This was a very interesting session. There would be so much more to discuss, but time is running out. I would ask all the participants to stay in the room because the next panel is going to follow in a few minutes. Thank you very much.